English translation. 595th contact Thursday, the 11th of September 2014, 16:26 hours.
Hello, Quetzal, my friend. This is a surprise, for it was not you but Ptah that I was expecting. However, you are welcome too.
Ptah will come here at a later hour, but for now I want to comment on all that Florina and Njana reported to us, according to your last General Assembly.
Oh, so that's why you came. I could have imagined it, because just as the two girls, Njana and Florina, were close to crying when they came to me last Sunday night, wanting to comfort me and were deeply affected by what happened at the General Assembly, it was inevitable that you would come here yourself.
That is correct, and so I would also like to hear from yourself what unpleasantness took place.
If you say so. Well, there was an unpleasant dispute that took place between me and a few group members, because they did not want to understand that I did not violate a group decision when I invited 8 passive group members to dinner in a very private way in connection with the Night Watch dinner. They had been working at the center throughout the week. Despite the fact that I explained that the invitation had nothing to do with the core group, because the invitation was purely private and I was paying for the costs of the invited guests myself, so that the Night Watch money of the core group was not affected, the whole thing was not accepted, but presented as a violation of the Night Watch dinner group resolution. In effect, I was simply muzzled.
This is very unpleasant, and since what has happened falls within my sphere of responsibility, because I was the driving force at the time when the request of the Night Watch was raised and a corresponding core group resolution was put into practice, I am also responsible for ensuring that the matter is justified and clarified. This is also necessary because certain few core group members have now reinterpreted the earlier resolution on their own authority and are apparently sticking to it. However, it may also be the case that, as has always been the case, the decision-making process was not listened to attentively, and the minutes of the decision were probably not recorded in sufficient detail. No matter how it was, however, you were unjustly attacked and shamefully accused of breaking core group resolutions once they had been passed and simply interpreting and bending them to suit yourself. This is also done in such a way that you are accused of simply consulting Ptah in such circumstances, and that justice would then be done in your favor by him. This is a rather malicious insinuation, and also expresses doubts as to whether we Playaran exist at all, or whether we could be a figment of your imagination. In this respect, however, we have proved often enough through our appearance and actions that our existence and your contacts with us are real, as all those core group and passive members of the free interest group who have had experiences of our presence can also testify. As for what you have been unjustly accused of, decency alone demands that an apology be made to you, because you did not do anything that would have violated the group's decision by inviting the passive members to the dinner. If, however, it is claimed otherwise, then this does not correspond to correctness, but to a distortion of the actual facts with regard to the group resolution. And what I would like to say about this is that it relates to the behavior of those who were involved in it, because it is clearly based on self-conceit and self-importance, as well as an arrogant self-righteousness, which amounts to an almost dictatorial influence on the group members in order to represent and push through their own views and opinions, which do not conform to the free interest group and its rules. In principle, it must be stated that the absolute group-related and also the private freedom of each individual group member, whether in relation to the core group or PG members, has absolute priority and must not be endangered by hidden dictatorial violence and coercion as well as influence and seduction leading to this. Other behavior, I will define it, is equivalent to blackmailing and sectarian behavior, which must not be tolerated at all in the free interest community. In this community, it cannot and must not be the case that openly or covertly dictatorial power, violence, and coercion are exercised, or that even the opinion of a member is disregarded. In principle, each member must have equal rights and be absolutely free in the community itself, as well as in the private sphere. Consequently, each member must be able to gain his or her own knowledge, form his or her own opinion, and cultivate his or her own thoughts, feelings, and behavior on his or her own responsibility, and must also be able to carry out his or her actions at his or her own discretion. Therefore, it must not be attempted in any way to suppress, change, or intimidate members by misleading them through immature personal views and airs, or by introducing authoritarian, domineering, and other ego-centered factors which partly or wholly disturb the free order of the community and also of only one member. Behavior contrary to these guidelines not only corresponds to a lack of decency, tolerance, modesty, and relational togetherness, a sense of mission and the value of a peaceful, free, harmonious, and unifying sense of community, but also to a lack of compassion for those fellow human beings who adhere to good and correct rules and in this respect represent something worthy of human beings and live by these rules both within themselves and externally, because they live in the certainty of the correctness of their behavior and thus also bring about much positive change in their environment. If, however, this is counteracted, then this corresponds exactly to what has been attempted for quite some time, namely, that a certain dominance is to be gained and everything is to be shaped and led only according to this. This, of course, does not allow for a correct fitting in with the rules, because from this autocratic point of view, an attempt is made to impose a different course on the members and the free interest community itself than the one that is legitimately given and opposed to every ruling, violent, coercive, and sectarian being. And it is also because of this behavior that any faults that occur are objected to by group members in an extremely low and primitive manner, thus creating discord, lack of freedom, and disharmony. There is more to be said about this. Human beings are and remain human beings, and this is also the case with us Pleiaren, and every human being is subject to error, also with regard to misbehavior in relation to decisions taken by a community, etc. Such errors, however, absolutely require discussion. Consequently, they must be talked about sensibly, and everything must be discussed and clarified, and this also when they have to be reprimanded. However, the necessary leniency must be exercised, which does not mean that resolutions and regulations should be deliberately disregarded, for leniency can only be applied when unintentional mistakes, etc., are committed. Deliberate disregard of resolutions and rules does not require leniency but a reprimand, although such a reprimand must also be relevant and justified. Therefore, it is in no way justified, as has been unjustly stated on various occasions by certain very few members of the group, as can be seen from our records of many years, that all mistakes and violations of group resolutions may be described as permanent occurrences. And of all people, those few who have always and repeatedly made such speeches in exuberant self-righteousness, as our AGM records show over the years, have the very least reason to complain about the behavior of the other members and to engage in so-called paragraph writing, as you once called such behavior. And when I say this, I am clearly aware that these very members will revolt and dispute this fact. The fact is that human beings who see only themselves and their ideas and everything solely according to their own false understanding, in their arrogance, intolerance, and self-important self-promotion, falsely see themselves in a brighter and better light than they grant the rest of the group members. This is also evidence of an arrogant bossiness, self-importance, self-righteousness, self-importance and presumptuousness in elevating oneself above other human beings, classifying them as inferior to oneself, and also treating them accordingly. But such human beings are also addicted to a profound egoism which blinds them to reality and its truth. And it is mainly these factors that lead to such human beings distancing themselves from others and imagining themselves to be better than they really are. Consequently, they appear bossy, know-it-all, and dictatorial, cannot build up or maintain a genuine interpersonal relationship, and are also unable to be fair. However, It has been known since time immemorial that precisely those human beings who express their outward personality in this way are so self-important that they unfortunately do not recognize the truth about their own person. And when they are told the truth about themselves, they reject it and justify themselves unjustifiably in order to always have the self-imagined right on their side, and to feel in control of the situation and confirmed in their self-imagined false righteousness, cleverness, and arrogance. And if I now take into account all the negative things I have mentioned, then I can only say that the whole negative thing is not worthy of the mission or the FIGU or the free interest community, and also not worthy of its members.
You speak a harsh language, Quetzal, but I have always been used to that from you, because you have never shied away from a frank word. So I must say that you get to the heart of the matter, and you are absolutely right. Therefore, since everything is clearly, plainly, and unambiguously stated, it will probably be the case, as I know from experience, that it will be responded to accordingly in unreason.
That will inevitably be the case. There is no doubt about that also for me. And in regard to what I have stated, I wish that my words be not swept under the table, as you once said in regard to one thing, but that my whole remarks be openly stated and recalled by you, and put in writing as a contact conversation.
I will do that, of course, because I think your remarks will be instructive not only internally but also externally. But what should be clarified by you now is the fact of the effective formulation with regard to the core group decision concerning the night watch and the night watch meal, just as the whole thing was formulated at that time. Incidentally, with regard to this resolution, the suggestion was made that the night vigil money accrued at the end of August, which is collected by skipping control stitches, should be used for something other than the night vigil meal.
I cannot agree to this, not simply because I am responsible for this arrangement, but because core group members are also in need of a convivial and happy get-together over a good meal from time to time. This proposal was unanimously approved by the core group members at the time and should also remain so. And what you then extended in this respect is that you also introduced the so-called Aquarian dinner for the month of February and the spring dinner in May, which corresponded to both my wish and that of Ta'a. In fairness, however, it should not be the case that it is always you alone who pays for the costs, because the necessary amount could be collected, just as it could also be possible for a single member to pay for the costs of such a joint group meal. Also, the possibility should be considered that each member pays for his own costs. And if I have to point out again that such social events are important and strengthen the sense of community and of being for and with each other, as you said at the time when you made your suggestions to me, then I can only continue to reaffirm that.
Thanks for your words, but I would like to ask you to clarify again what the night vigil resolution entailed when it was passed according to your proposal.
Of course, I have not addressed that yet. The core group resolution was formulated correctly on my part and was also presented to the core group in the correct manner. However, it is to be assumed that it was not comprehensively recorded in the minutes. On the other hand, it is to be assumed, as I have already explained, that, as has often been the case, the decision-making process was not listened to in a correct manner. The fact is that the overall resolution was that the night watchmen should carry out their duty correctly and do each control stitch at the appropriate control places, which requires considerable attention, also with regard to the control of the buildings and the surroundings, etc. If a control stitch is not done, it was decided that the offending person should contribute CHF2 to the Night Watch Fund for each missing control stitch on the watch clock. The resulting amount should be collected from the month of August until the next month of August, and then used to finance a social gathering in a good restaurant over dinner. The amount collected shall be used exclusively for this purpose and only for the core group members, so that no non-core group members or passive members shall benefit from this amount of money. It was left open, but considered self-evident, that passive members or close family members may be invited as guests to socialize and dine at the invitee's own expense if they are privately invited to do so by core group members. It can also be accepted, which should be an absolute matter of course, and is also in keeping with hospitality, that passive members or close family members can take part in such social gatherings, especially if they are present at the center for visiting or work purposes. If, in accordance with a core group resolution, the necessary financial resources can be provided from the general operating or expense fund, then this is also acceptable. And what is still to be said with regard to the fact that no non-FIGU members should be invited to such convivial meal events, not only at the so-called Night Watch meal, but also at the Aquarius and May meal, then this is based on the fact that no animating and proselytizing with regard to the mission takes place. For on such occasions, animating and proselytizing is inevitable. For questions, answers, and conversations inevitably arise which may take forms of animating and proselytizing, which, however, is not in accordance with the rules of mission.
You said that back when we were talking about my idea of February, May, and December dinners as well as the Night Watch dinner. But I think that what you have now said should be explanation enough and that everything should now be finally clarified. Everything is extremely unpleasant, as has been said several times now, but I think that this should now put an end to all talk about it.
I also think so.
Well, thanks then for your comments and corrections, which I think is also certainly in the spirit of the whole core group.
Then I will go my way again. But I do not want to neglect to mention that before I came here to your workroom, I inspected everything in the area and found it to be good. I am glad to say that I have seen that there are no more factors to complain of in regard to the treatment of the trees, bushes, and shrubs. The tidiness and cleanliness of the whole area is also to my liking, which should also remain so. This year only a few bushes, shrubs, and trees need a little pruning, which I will show you in person when I come here again for this purpose in a few days.
I also have to prune your peach tree.
I saw that.
Hartmut looked it up in a book and found that it should not be done until spring.
It is pleasing that he is making an effort to do this, but I still want my instructions on this to be taken into account in general.
Of course, Hartmut is also in agreement with that because I already talked to him about it in the spring. I also know a bit about pruning bushes, trees, and shrubs, not very well, but at least in such a way that I can give some necessary instructions in this regard and also bear responsibility for it.
I am familiar with that. But now I want to go and inform you when I will come back. For my part, I find it very regrettable what happened at the General Assembly last Saturday, though I hope you are no longer particularly distressed about it.
It was really intense for me and robbed me of sleep for 3 nights. But in the end, I calmed down again, and I am happy about the fact that apart from the exceptions who defended the whole thing from the wrong point of view, for whatever reason, all the group members were on my side. And even afterwards, that is to say after the General Assembly, as well as on Sunday and the days until today, they gave me good and kind words. I was particularly pleased with Eva's words when she spoke at the lunch meeting in the hall on Sunday afternoon, and also told everyone what she thought about the matter, whereby she also addressed the FIGU duty of hospitality. Interestingly, there was then kind of an embarrassed silence, which seemed to me as if there was some reflection on her execution.
I also heard this from the records, and so I want to express my thanks for all those who have spoken in the manner you have mentioned, and have stood by you in regard to your correct actions and conduct. But now, dear friend, my further duties call me. Goodbye.
Bye, and thanks also to you, my friend. Take care.